Since its roots in Star Trek, fan spaces, often known as fandoms, have often been ran by and mostly comprised of women. However, female characters still face horrific treatment at the hands of fans, as do the women that participate in fandom. This has been a long-standing issue and is one I've seen and experienced myself. From female characters being ignored and pushed aside in favor of a fictional relationship, to people scrutinizing female characters with a fury that is almost never directed towards men, misogyny surrounding fan spaces is a rampant issue that many people online are trying to address. Misogyny is defined as men's fear and hatred of women with power and is considered a social problem. Misogyny causes many things women do and are interested in to be dumbed down and not taken seriously, which is especially seen in the stark contrast between the general public's views on male sports fans versus women in fandoms. In her article, Is Fandom an Obsession or Is That Just the Misogyny Talking?, Alicia Lansome recounts her experiences as a young fan of Justin Bieber in the 2010s. She talks about being laughed at for knowing the singer's birthday and the words to his songs, while her male peers could discuss every injury their favorite football player had ever had and be thought of as well informed. She goes on to say that the sentiment was loud and clear. When girls know a lot about something they love, they're crazy. When boys do, they're passionate. This just proves the fact that the interests of men are clearly seen as more legitimate, as opposed to the crazy obsessions of their female peers, which is one of the clearest external examples of misogyny surrounding fan spaces. But that doesn't even begin to uncover the several instances of internal fandom misogyny. Last month, I put out an anonymous survey on multiple platforms asking people for their experiences with fandom misogyny, which garnered 42 responses. Overwhelmingly, many of the examples respondents provided pointed to women being neglected and overlooked in their canonical relationships in favor of a non-canonical relationship, which will often be between two men. Furthermore, a specific example of this phenomenon that came up a lot was the fandom treatment of the character Mel Medarda from the TV show Arcane League of Legends. When respondents were talking about this example, many of them brought up the fact that Mel is a black woman, and the relationship she is often pushed aside to focus on is one between two non-black men. With this, I think this is an excellent time to define intersectionality. Intersectionality is the idea of there being multiple axes of inequality, also referred to as relations of advantage and disadvantage. This means that while misogyny is one form of oppression, it often intersects with racism, homophobia or transphobia, ableism, and other types of oppression. The intersectionality between these forms of oppression creates a unique experience, meaning a black woman's experience with misogyny is vastly different from a white woman's. With the example of Mel from Arcane, we can clearly see the ties between misogyny directed at her along with the racism. These two forms of oppression intersect and create an example of the disposable black girlfriend trope. This trope is described by the coiner of the term Yomi Adegoke as a race-bent, gender-specific version of the disposable fiancé or romantic false lead tropes, described as the love interest's love interest, the person brought in either for an episode or an arc to date the one that the main character, or just a character, is in love with. While this trope has been implemented, both intentionally and unintentionally, into many stories by its original creators, it is often added to the story by fans, as is the case with Mel. Furthermore, the gaming community and related fandoms have a massive misogyny problem. In her essay, Women Not Allowed in Techno, Geek, and Gaming Culture, Inru Yune says, game developers are often creating female characters that are highly sexualized, both in their character design and role within the game. One of my respondents brought up the example of games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, and, like Yune, specifically pointed out outfit design. In these games, and similar ones, women are often depicted in ankle-breaking heels and dresses that would slip the second you tried to run. This phenomenon connects back to the idea of the feminine apologetic, or the requirement that women balance masculine interests, traits, and activities with conventional femininity, to soothe others' concerns about our appropriation of masculinity. By dressing these women, who in many video games will often be in intense combat situations, in feminine clothing, it makes them sexually appealing to the mostly heterosexual male audience. Another factor that is important to consider is that many of these games rely on their income being generated by their gacha system, or a mechanic that has the player spend in-game currency, and by extension, real money, on a character that they can use in combat. When companies like Hoyoverse, the team behind Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, make their female characters appealing to their male audience, they generate more money, which also ties back into the exploitation of women for their bodies. The misogyny within the gaming community can also be seen in the way women playing games are treated. The gaming space is overwhelmingly male dominated, which can really be seen in the fact that male gamers are simply called gamers, while female gamers are referred to as gamer girls. One example from my survey mentioned men having an innate sense of superiority over women when it comes to them having the same interests, even if that woman had been a fan of that interest for her entire life. Another point discussed by several respondents to the forum was the hatred for complex or morally gray women. While there wasn't one consistent example for this point, it's a phenomenon and trend that I've noticed myself. In my experience, I've seen many people call female characters awful things while praising and loving a male character that acts the exact same way, or worse, often with less justification than their female counterparts. In Yellow Jackets, the story of the TV show centers around a girls' soccer team that is stranded in the remote wilderness after their plane crashes. As the show progresses, we see the girls get more and more desperate to survive, leading to a few instances of cannibalism. All that is to say, one of the main characters, Shauna Shipman, participates in the same cannibalism and awful things as the rest of the team and takes up the mantle of their leader, often spearheading those awful acts. Due to her being the most vicious of the girls that lead the group throughout the show, many people refer to her as cartoonishly evil and call her the devil, as well as a slew of other nicknames such as Oshana bin Laden. Many will also say that they hate her and hope for her death in the upcoming season 4. Some people will even go as far as to say that the team should have eaten her stillborn child, or that she deserved to lose her child. Actually, brushing aside her trauma to make Shauna the evil one is an incredibly common phenomenon in the Yellow Jackets fandom. While I can admit, even as a fan of her character, that she does horrific things within the context of the show, let's look at how an equally evil male character from another story is treated. Anakin Skywalker, as I'm sure many people know, does plenty of awful things within the Star Wars universe. He slaughters a group of children, he chokes his wife, he threatens to take over the universe, and builds a giant fucking death machine to blow up planets. The fandom's opinion on him, though? He was manipulated. He was in a tough position. He's complicated. He wasn't always evil. He wanted to save his wife. While there are people that argue he is evil, the general public's opinion of Anakin is much kinder than the general public's opinion of Shauna. If anyone can find me a screenshot of someone saying that Anakin's kids should have been eaten, I'll take that into account and consider my point disproven. For my final point in this video, I want to circle back to shipping and women being ignored in favor of ships between men. Shipping is defined as a romantic pairing between two or more characters and is often a pairing that doesn't actively exist in the original story. Shipping and the culture around it is incredibly LGBTQ+ friendly, as are most fandoms. Every year, User Center of These Lights on popular fanfiction website Archive of Our Own, or AO3, posts a year in review. This compiles the most written about ships on the website, along with the genders and races of characters in said ships. In the 2025 year in review, there were 202 names on the list. Of those 202, 35 were women, 1 was non-binary, and 7 were of indeterminate gender. Additionally, 8 of the 100 ships were FF, or between two women. This data shows how incredibly skewed online shipping is towards men and how difficult it is to find content written about women, much less about two women together. The lack of femslash, or FF content, also ties back into intersectionality, since queer women and lesbians are often silenced and ignored and often have trouble finding content about relationships like theirs. As for a movement trying to fix these issues, I can't find a centralized movement that is trying to combat misogyny in fandom spaces. However, many people will speak up about individual issues they see. One current instance of this that I could find goes back to the video game Genshin Impact. With the game's most recent event, players that selected the female main character at the beginning of the game, as opposed to the male option, noticed that the in-game event art didn't reflect their decision and shows the male main character no matter what they picked. Many of these players have been speaking up online by tagging the developers in their complaints, as well as using in-game user satisfaction surveys to voice their issues. However, the issue of the Genshin dev team excluding the female MC goes back years. Recently, Twitter users uncovered a petition from 2022 trying to convince the devs to include the female MC in more of their promotional and in game content. Obviously, this demand has not been met, but these players are still speaking up. Again, this isn't a wider movement trying to address fandom misogyny, but rather a specific example of a community fighting it. Some of the most fascinating and complex characters in fiction go overlooked just for being women. This is an issue that has been ongoing for many, many years and is one that will probably be ongoing for a long time. I just hope that as more people start to pick up on fandom misogyny, it starts to die down. Someday soon, I hope that no one will have to worry about this issue and that women will be appreciated for who they are, both in fiction and outside of it.